Where to begin? Okay, I'll begin at the beginning. I was born in Baltimore, Maryland, and then we moved to Mount Kisco, New York, and then we moved to Encino, California, and then we moved to Mill Valley, California, and then we moved to North Salem, New York, and then we moved to Katona, New York, and then we moved to the Bronx, and then we moved to White Plains, New York, all before I was 14. So those of you who have always lived here, it's hard for me to relate. Somewhere in the midst of that, my mother started descending into her alcoholism and madness. She was an alcoholic. She died an alcoholic, severely mentally ill, violent, crazy. I can call her crazy because she's my mother. My father's also an alcoholic. He got dry, but he never got sober. He still had all that alcoholic stuff, the dishonesty and the manipulation, and can't really believe any of it. And it was just a violent and chaotic experience growing up. And my mother was the principal perpetrator of violence. Those who think that women don't commit domestic violence are grossly uninformed. And my father would go on the road. He was a traveling salesman with everything that implies, for like days and weeks at a time, and leave us in the house with a crazy, violent drunk. Sometimes we knew who he was, and sometimes we didn't. And we would overhear her screaming into the phone that she was going to kill us all if he didn't come home, and he wouldn't come home. I am not an alcoholic because that happened. I'm an alcoholic because I'm an alcoholic. There's a certain amount of genetics that has to do with that, having to do with the way the brain of an alcoholic processes dopamine and serotonin to create cravings. But I'm an alcoholic because I'm an alcoholic. I don't drink because all that happened. But the reason why it's important is I drinking when I was 14. I met a bunch of people in White Plains, New York. I was trying to fit in. They all drank. I drank. Never really liked it all that much, but it gave me an entree to a group of people. I don't remember when it got out of control. But I survived that family and went away to college and, got involved in college radio because that's where the stoners drinkers were. Got out of school with a degree in theoretical sociology and one set of skills. I knew how to operate a radio station, so I went into broadcasting. That led me to journalism, which led me to working for newspapers, which I was very successful at, and eventually ended up in San Francisco as a writer, working full-time at a newspaper. And I said I felt fine, which meant I felt nothing. I drove a fancy car, not that fancy, but fancy enough. I worked for a major newspaper. I was a force to be reckoned with in Silicon Valley. On the outside, I looked great, except that I was drinking, doping, and binge eating constantly. I lost one newspaper job because I was buzzed and not paying attention, and mistakes got into the paper when they'll fire you for that. So they did. That kind of thing happened a couple of times, but I only actually got fired once for that. And so I'm going through my life like this, and everything looks fine on the outside, so I think everything's fine, and I don't feel anything at all. And then something happened. My father up and died. He got cancer and died. And all of a sudden, no anymore for the first time ever. And that introduced to meetings, first Al-Anon. I came in through the Al-Anon door. Doesn't matter what door you come in, just come in. And that was in February of 1991. And by August of 1991, I realized that I was one of the people that I was talking about in Al-Anon meetings. And I was out of control. I was skidding along the bottom. I was working at home as a writer, which basically meant I somehow got the writing done. Um, that's the amazing part of it. But I was spending a lot of my time getting wasted in front of the television set and binge eating. That was my life, and not answering the phone unless I had to interview someone for an article I was writing. And that was kind of my life. It's pretty isolating and depressing. So push came to shove, and I realized I couldn't go on that way forever. My dad had been dead for several months and recovering, and I was just drinking all the time, so drinking and doping and being. So I stumbled into a meeting in August of 1991, and yeah, I'm not really sure of the time. So if you would somebody would like flag me at 15 minutes, that would be helpful. I came into a meeting in August of 1991 and did not get sober right away. But you know what they say about it? It'll ruin your drinking. Because I'd get home from meetings and I would know exactly what I was doing. You know, the awakening starts when you come in the room. And I knew what I was doing. And I didn't know what the shape thing was, and I was just going to meetings and soaking it in. And I was standing online at the Great American Music Hall in San Francisco, waiting to see Dave Berg, and a guy from the meeting, just at random, walked up behind me online. And he became my first sponsor. And with his help, I got sober somewhere in the middle of October. I claim October 15th as my sobriety date. I don't really know for sure. I was a mess. But I know it's the middle of October, and the 15th is the middle of October. So I stopped drinking. And then things got really interesting, because then I really wasn't numb anymore. And on the fourth day of sobriety, I started having really severe PTSD symptoms from the violence I grew up with. And it was so bad that I physically could not leave my bedroom for like 2 or 3 days. I went out and got food, but I just stayed locked in the room. I was freaked out and having nightmares and flashbacks, the full-on PTSD experience. But I didn't drink. I started calling people in the program and going to meetings all the time, and somehow managed to hold on to that writing job. And did really, I always looked great on the outside. I got nominated for awards as a journalist, and I drove a great car, and I worked at a big newspaper, but I was a train wreck in every way you can imagine. So things kind of went on like that for a few months. And I was getting more and more depressed, and I was getting more and more suicidal. And I was clinging to sobriety. Sobriety is the hand of God. I mean it. Sobriety is the hand of God. No matter how bad things get, this hand comes out and says, hold on to this, and I will pull you through. That's sobriety. And saying that I'm an alcoholic is a part of it, is a partial truth. I'm also a drug addict, and to me, they're all the same. Because the only problem is in the actual 12 steps is in the 12th step, it says will be awake. Spiritual awakening will be awake. If I'm not drinking, but I'm doping or binge eating, I'm not awake. So by the time we got to the following May, I had decided that I was going to drive off the Dumbarton Bridge outside San Francisco, because it was the way that I could make it look like an accident and nobody got hurt. And some people, including my sponsor, figured out just how bad it was, and they got me locked up. And then I wanted to like just run them all over and then drive off the bridge. I was so angry at that. In California, they put you away for 3 days without your permission. And at the end of 3 days, if you're still not safe, they keep you for 14 days. It's called a 5250. So I was actually inside for 20 days altogether, and still didn't drink. It's a fucking miracle. And things started to get better after that. For one reason and one reason only. The second step is for real. People say the second step is about faith, and it really is not about faith for me. My experience is that the second step is real, because I should be dead, strung out, or in jail. That's the simple truth. I should not have survived the early 1990s. I was ready to drive off the bridge, and I didn't. So now I'm out of work. I'm still employed, but I'm off work, working as a freelance writer, which gave me the time to go to meetings every day. Every single day. You know, the thing about going to meetings every day, if you start going to meetings every day, you start to notice that there's a whole bunch of people who go to meetings every day. This is before we all had cell phones. This is before the internet. Because I was a journalist, I always had a notebook in my back pocket. My first meeting, you go to, write down 3 phone numbers and call those people. And if you don't have anything to say, just tell him your sponsor's making you do it and he's crazy. And it worked for me because if nothing else, one of the first things the program will do is it'll break the back of your isolation. Working alone as a writer and doping and binge eating all the time is a very isolating existence. And there were people who came up and just plain loved me when I did not feel that was a possible thing to have happen. And I worked it. I started working the steps. And step 1 is obvious, right? I'm powerless over all this shit and my life is unmanageable. And this sort of this if-then piece, if the first step is true, then the second step had better be true, or we really are all screwed. Right? And the first step is so obviously true. And then if the second step is true, then the obvious thing to do is in the third step, right? I'm going to say, okay, my life is a train wreck, and now I've admitted it, and I've identified the solution, but I'm not going for that. I tried to quit on my own. You know, I started working the 2 to 10. This one, I thought I'm just, you know, that'll work because I know I'm not going to get buzzed and go to work. Well, that lasted about 3 weeks. That's the job I got fired from. You know, so you can guess how that worked out. I did all kinds of things to try to quit on my own, and none of them worked. Once I accepted the second step, then the third step was just the obvious thing to do. And the third step does not require me to turn my will and my life over, because I don't actually know how to do that at that stage of the game. The third step requires me to make a decision about that. It's made a decision. Those are the first 3 words that we talked about. Made a decision to turn, and I really take that literally, turn left, turn right, towards God and walk that way. And walk towards the awakening that's spelled out in the 12th step. And then that has to become all the rest of the decisions. Is this decision me towards God? Towards the God of my understanding, which is another complicated subject. If I'm drinking, doping, or binge eating, is that turning me towards God? If I'm lying to you, is that a decision that turns me towards God? If I am acting outside integrity, is that turning me towards God? If I'm acting inside integrity, is that turning towards God? Here's something I learned about that. I was in a meeting in Palo Alto. By the way, California folks, send bran muffins. You can't get them out here. I miss them. And I heard a guy say his higher power is the truth, because it's the one thing you cannot argue with. I can buy off on that. So the third step says turn towards the truth, among other things. And I don't know what my will in my life is, so then I have to do the fourth step to find out. Then I have to blow all that into the light, because really, the voice of my addict alcoholic self, I can always tell it's that voice, because it says, nobody has to know about this. Right? One of the bennies of the program, one of the great things of the program, I get to live my life out in the open. How cool is that? Anybody can ask me where I was, what I was doing, who I was with, and what my intention was, any time of the day or night, and I can tell them. And I'm good with that. I've got nothing to be ashamed of. So I came out the other side of that tunnel. And that's the other piece of truth that I learned, is no matter where you are, and if you're in a difficult space, don't forget that it is a tunnel. It is not a cave, right? It feels like a cave and you're stuck in the back and the front and it's collapsing and there's water and booze coming in and you're going to drown, but it's not. It's a tunnel. And you just keep putting one foot in front of the other, and then the light at the other end of the tunnel is that big, bright, beautiful light you get to have when you get to the other side of the tunnel, and or me coming at you on my motorcycle, or both. It says in the big book, no matter how far down the scale you've gone, you can come back. I have gone from being on the verge of suicide to actually feeling pretty good about my life these days. I mean, I got stuff going on, and him and hawing about crap. I really had to explore what the higher power is and what my relationship to that is, and come to something that works for me. It's worth reading the early history, because those guys, they fought over it, they hassled over it, they bitched over it, they massaged it, and they came up with these 12 steps. And it was not an easy process. But whoever came up with the wording in the second step is a flipping genius. But in the big book, it says there's one who has all power. And I have struggled with that, because part of the awakening, as a result of the spiritual awakening in this program, I quit journalism, got a psych degree, went back to school, got a psych degree, got a license as a therapist. And in the process of doing that, went to work in a clinic that worked exclusively with child abuse, sexual abuse. And what happened was, I'm working in this place, it's a very intense place to work, and I'm seeing these 10, 11, 9, 8-year-old kids, 6-year-old kids, and I knew why they were there. I knew what had happened to them. And I looked at that, and I looked at where it says in the big book, there's one who has all power. And I said, you're a fucking absentee landlord. How the hell am I supposed to trust that? That was a genuine spiritual crisis for me. And I really had to work with that and figure it out. And what it came down to, again, is the language of the steps. Some people have heard me say this, and some people don't like it, but take what you like and leave the rest. You can tear out the pages with the steps and toss all the rest of the literature, and you have everything you need to recover. Between 1935 and 1939, that's all they had. They started with 8, and we're still talking about it. There's only one actual description of God in the steps. It's in the second step. A power greater than myself that can restore me to sanity. Okay, I can buy off on that. Do I wish it would stop what happens to those children? Absolutely. And end the wars, and end the poverty, and end the child abuse. Make the political system into what I want. Solve world hunger. I've been to the third world. Solve world hunger. It doesn't do that. But it's a big, bright, beautiful light, as described as a power greater than myself that restores sanity. And the steps are a set of instructions on how to go out and stand in front of that light. And if you work the steps, you will discover, A, you're actually a really good person. You are not messed up. You're just wounded. You're not bad. And we get to heal. There's nothing to be afraid of in your own heart. I need to say that again. There's nothing to be afraid of in your own heart. You have already been hurt, and this is what that looks like. And the healing path includes looking right at it. It's gall, it takes guts, it takes chutzpah. You look right at that stuff and shine a light on it, and the shadow disappears just like that. It's work. And it's the best work you will ever do. So now, I think I've got about 4 minutes left, or less, so I'll wrap. My life is pretty good. I got some stuff going on. Everybody, all God's children got stuff going on. Everybody you see on the street, everybody you see in meetings, everybody you see in the supermarket, everybody you see everywhere has something going on, and they all think that they're the only ones. I got stuff going on. I went through a major health crisis for 2 months this summer, not COVID. Almost ended up needing a transplant. Didn't drink through that either. Now it's true that if I drink the alcohol will kill me for sure, but now it'll kill me really fast. You know, because if I start drinking it again, it'll like destroy a certain part of my body. I don't qualify for the transplant and blah, blah, blah. So that there's only one promise in the 12 steps. It's in the 12th step, we'll be awake. And sometimes awake is beautiful and easy, and sometimes it sucks moose turds. But I will choose that. I will choose the waking state, even on my worst days, before I'll choose any of the ways in which I can just sleepwalk through the world, because that's just really dangerous and I'll be dead fairly soon. And my life is a beautiful thing. I'm lucky enough that there are people who love me, and I'm lucky enough to love some people. I have been blessed to be able to do the work that I do, and I decided to retire at the end of the year. When I was sick over the summer, it looked like I might be forced into retirement for health reasons, and I did some math and met with a financial guy, and it turns out that I can actually do that. So I am. And I've got another adventure planned. I'm going to be teaching meditation. All of this is because of the program. How am I going to actualize this in my life? Well, I actualized it for 25 years by being a shrink, and now I'm going to actualize it by teaching meditation. I wrapped my whole life around this. Now, I'm probably heading into an identity crisis of some sort, because I've got a lot of my identity wrapped up in this. But in the end, it's all about self-compassion and learning to love yourself. And the most important, if you take nothing else away from me, be kind and gentle with yourself all the time. All the time. There's no difficult situation that can't be made worse by being hard on yourself. At the end of this process, when you come out the other side of whatever tunnel you're in, you're going to discover that you're a really good person who was not made horrible, but just wounded and healed it. And now you have an opportunity to take that out in the world and pass it around to other people. It's a beautiful thing. So I want to thank Stuart for inviting me to come here tonight. It's good to see y'all. For you who are early risers, get up and check out the Early Worms. It's a cool meeting, man. I'm there almost every day. So thanks for being here.